Fantastic. Let's get going here on this. My name is Scott Baldwin. I'm the community lead and product evangelist here at Productboard, and I run the Product Makers community. So thanks everybody for joining us. A little bit of housekeeping for today. We will have a recording of today's session available afterwards on our Product Makers community. If you have a colleague or a friend that might be interested in taking a look at it, or are open to sharing it with some other people, will be available for you on our homepage as well as within the event recap section. We'll also be utilizing Q&A for questions today, chat for chat at any point during the session. If you are going to utilize the chat, though, do remember to select to everyone versus hosts and panelists, so we can make sure everybody that's part of the conversation can see that. And I'm welcoming today Andrew Fragias. Andrew's a product manager at Validity, Salesforce certified administrator with specializations in email marketing, CRM, user productivity, and Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And you've probably seen Andrew around our community. If you're actually active in that, Andrew also is one of our Product Makers ambassadors and has been a longtime community member and participant. So really excited to have Andrew contributing to the conversation on our craft of product today. And I'm going to pass over to Andrew now to spend some time and share screen on his talk.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, and g'day, everyone. Hope you guys are all doing well this morning. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get straight into it today. As Scott mentioned, my name's Andrew Fragias. We're going to go through what comes first, juggling product priorities. This is something that, is an ongoing learning curve. I would say in my career, I've learned a lot of lessons through prioritization. I want to share some with you guys, and I want you guys to share some as you go along in this as well. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about first why prioritization is important, the factors impacting prioritization, and two key things I like to call the what and why. And then at the end, we'll share some real life examples that I've lived through and had some, I would say, a bit of learning around them as well. Yeah, pretty much Scott hit the nail on the head with my introduction. So I'm product manager here at Validity. I manage a couple of our products, in particular, Grid Buddy Connect. We'll talk a bit about that when I give you some examples of that. I've been around the Salesforce community for quite some time now in the ecosystem, and now being a product manager at Validity. So let's get straight into it. Why prioritization is important. Now, you could just put your finger in the air and have a little guess and have a guess of what you, as a product manager, you think and believe is important. And that's good because, it's good to have an understanding of how your product works and what is, something that is next for your product. But overall, if you don't have prioritization, you end up seeing a lot of chaos, right? Not just chaos from yourself, but chaos around your strategic roadmap, your product roadmap, your business direction, and there is no clear path. A lot of customers and prospects want to see a clear path in a product overall, and they want to see that natural progression. And as I'm going through all these impacts, I want you guys to share in the chat, like Scott mentioned, some experience or reflect on some experiences you guys have had in the past, where you've noticed this chaos. I know for sure, I've fallen victim to it a couple of times, just adding things in mid-sprint when, you can easily wait, but just because of that eagerness I have, I'm like, all right, well, we've got the bandwidth. We know we can do this. Let's just add it in. Another one is team on satisfaction, hand in hand with that chaos. If you keep chucking things in, like I mentioned, it's your engineering team, your developers, whatever you want to call it, is going to become unhappy, right? You're going to be chucking them in all sorts of directions. They're going to be constantly context switching. And that overall will impact, how effective they are at what they do. How quick they can complete things, and also, the quality. If they're constantly context switching, there is a lot more chance that things will be missed. And this isn't just, something that I've experienced by visually seeing. This is feedback that I've gotten, right? And I like to be open and transparent with my team, and the team is very open and transparent back. So we have that channel. When I was first learning this, the importance of it, this is something that came up. Obviously, I touched on it at the beginning a little bit, unclear roadmap. Why is an unclear roadmap important? Hey, your product wants to have a direction, right? It needs to have a direction to always progress and keep that edge against your competitors, right? Because if your competitors have a clear roadmap, they know what they're going to do next. if you don't, and you're constantly relying on something new to pop up instantly and then work on it, then you're going to get to a point where nothing pops up and you don't really know what you're going to do next, and your product will hit a stalemate. Productivity overall, this is the productivity of everyone involved. It's not just the product management side of things. It's not just the engineering side of things. You know, there are different people involved during your prioritization process. Your marketing team, your UX team, you've got your go-to-market team, even your lead gen, demand gen team. They're all impacted, your sales team, your customer success team. And if you're constantly shifting priorities and giving very last minute notice as a result of that, then they're going to be impacted because they're not going to be able to work as efficient as they need to be. You should be setting out regular cadences where you know, doing demos back to your customer success team, giving new information out to your sales team through, you know, your sales enablement for a trainer system. But constantly shifting that, you can't really set up a regular cadence. And then those teams, you know, the engagement they have overall with yourself as well as the rest of the business is going to be going down. So let's talk about some factors that can cause this, right? Roadmap, right? If you don't have a roadmap, if you don't have a defined set of even objectives, let's start off with objectives first before you go on the granularity of feature by feature and bug fixes. If you don't have a clear set of objectives of where you want to go, even if it's just for the quarter, right? Before we talk, you know, half yearly, yearly, 2-year plan. If you don't have a clear objective for a quarter, then you're going to be constantly throwing things in the mix, right? And even though you're developing a whole bunch of new features, the features won't make sense, right? And what I mean by that is, yes, they're fulfilling a need, but altogether, they won't be showing a clear direction of where you want to go with the product. In one instance, you're developing this one feature that, you know, it adds the ability to define a set of filters. And then on the other side, you're developing a feature that allows you to favorite a particular part of your product. Although those two are very beneficial features, but if you're developing features like a filtering first, you haven't refined the filters, you haven't done iterations on it or the second version of it, and you're straight away jumping over to favoriting things, it's sort of conflicting to what you're going to do. Another thing you got to consider is the severity. Severity is driven on a couple of instances. If it's a bug fix that you need to do rather than an enhancement or a new feature, the severity is usually based on the impact it has on the product itself, as well as the customers and the amount of revenue tied to that customers collectively. In terms of features, you know, a great thing we do, we use Productboard, right? We can tell how many customers have voted for a particular feature. We have Productboard embedded in majority of our products now. We have the portals, they can easily log in customers and vote for features. If you have one customer who is, let's say, for example, paying what a bottom tier customer would be paying, requesting a feature that takes a quarter worth of work to do, that isn't a high severity. However, if you have multiple low tier customers, collectively, their accumulated revenue contribution puts it into a high tier, and they've all voted for it, and it takes a quarter's worth of work, and it's the right direction to go in, then that will give it a lot more severity. If we take towards benefit now, what benefit are you delivering with this particular feature, enhancement, or even the bug fix? Sometimes you might determine a bug fix isn't necessary right now, right? It's something that is an edge case. It's only one customer's reported it, and there is a workaround, or the product's never functioned like that in the first place. And then that sort of converts it over into an enhancement or a feature overall. So if you're looking at the benefit, this is where you start to get into the user story acceptance criteria, customer interviews, understanding the actual need behind it versus the want. We'll talk a bit more about the need versus the want later on. The benefit is, are we going in the direction, and this is what I like to consider with our product, are we going in the same direction, delivering upon the benefits and the selling points we have today? Or the other path I like to take is, are we adding a new selling point to our product? And what kind of opportunity does this give us? So majority of times in the product world, you attribute a certain sales target to that, right? To a feature, it's going to cost X amount of dollars to get this feature built. And how long does it take us to make that X amount of dollars back, right? Let's say we build a brand new feature overall. This opens the market from a $10 million pool to an additional $10 million. So your total addressable market goes to 20 million. And it only took, let's say, $20,000 worth. That gives you an idea of the benefit that you can deliver. And finally, not finally, I should say, one more before that is effort, right? How long is it going to take? Although the severity may be high, the benefit may be, let's say it's a little benefit, but the effort is half a year, for example. This is all three factors you need to take into consideration. You can't look at them separately. If you take them separately, they all have their own meaning. And this is, things that we look at when we look in Productboard in the features side of things. We have severity, we have benefit, we have effort, we have, feasibility as well. And it gives us that score. With the effort, sometimes it's worth the effort. That aligns with the severity, it aligns with the benefit, and it aligns with the roadmap. In most cases, and I've been through this before and I've made the mistake before, and I'm sure you guys could reflect on sometimes where you've come close to making this mistake, where the effort is, let's say it's 2 sprints worth of work. The benefit is delivered for one customer only. And the severity is it's a prospect. It's not even an actual customer. And they're threatening not to sign with us overall. But what you throw out to put this in is where you start to jeopardize the rest of your program, right? The rest of the product, the rest of the things that you're delivering. If we remove 2 items for this as a result of it, or even more because it's across 2 sprints and it's for a potential customer, not even a customer yet, you impact your existing customer base. And that's the things you've got to start to consider when you're prioritizing overall. We then have revenue. I touched on this a little bit with the benefit, because benefit's not just a monetary benefit, right? It's also, usability benefit, the experience, or even just the actual benefit your product delivers. Revenue is the actual dollar amount you can tie to this specific feature or this specific enhancement or even bug fix. Say the severity of the bug fix is impacting 3/4 of your platform, right, or your product. That has a significant revenue impact, because you can then tie that to, let's say we have 10 customers, you can tie that to 8 out of the 10 customers. And you can then tie the revenue attribution that each of those customers have. And then the other impact in our prioritization is the good, friendly people in leadership. At the end of the day, the business has objectives, business has a path that it wants to go to, and the business has a direction. And the leadership help determine that path. As product managers, you can help influence that direction. But if a new feature comes in today that doesn't align with our current leadership, and we've looked at the severity, we've looked at our roadmap, we said, all right, we've got a little bit of room to squeeze something in. We've looked at the benefit, we've looked at the effort, and the revenue impact as well, or growth, and it doesn't align with the leadership goals, then you should stop for a minute, think about it through, and this is me talking from experience, and propose a case, a business case as to why you think the extra bit of room we've got left on our current development cycle, or whenever it is, deserves to be on this new feature. And it doesn't align with the leadership goals, and then you will need to justify that. Don't just blindly make a decision to add it in. So when we look at it overall, we shouldn't look at these points separately. We should look at them in combination. And that's once you understand all of them put together. The what and why, my 2 favorite things. So we're going to go through first how to ask what. Now, this line of questioning, the aim is to uncover what the true requirements are and supply yourself with all the information needed to begin planning a solution. These are crucial in a consultant's day-to-day, as well as, product manager's day-to-day, or associate product manager, whatever it may be. So here's some of the questions that you can ask. What are you trying to achieve? This underlying question is essentially try and get behind the want that the customer is presenting or the prospect is presenting and saying, right, forget about proposing a solution. Talk me through the business problem you're trying to solve. What present day functionality can handle this? Now, this is important because this helps determine, if there is a workaround. And we'll see these in practice in my examples in a minute and see the thought process behind applying these and getting the answers you get from each of these questions. What is the business benefit? So again, tying back to what we talked about before, we look at the benefit overall that's provided. And these questions, you may not necessarily have to ask the customer or whoever submitted the feature. These questions is majority of the times you should be asking yourself as a product manager when you're reviewing the requirements. What is the business benefit? What is the driving factor behind it? What is the timeline or priority? And when we look at timeline priority, that's when we tie in things like severity, the amount of customers that have voted for this idea, the amount of feedback, the total impact it has on the product if it's a bug. And then what are the use cases for this requirement? Now, this is critical to understand so that you can present a well-groomed ticket to your engineering and development team. You can use all sorts of different ticketing systems. Productboard has this very well embedded into the feature side of things where you can refine it. There are templates as well, which is a great use to us. And you can put your user story, acceptance criteria, or whatever format you use to clearly define your requirements for your engineering team to then go ahead and estimate it. And then also begin the discussion with them of where it impacts. So these are the 5 key ones that I tend to look at when prioritizing overall. Then we go to look at the why. Now you'll notice when we start to ask these questions, they're not starting with the word why, because that can come across a bit like you're questioning your customer or your stakeholders at the time. You're constantly asking someone why. You're putting a bit more sort of aggression to it, not on purpose, but you don't want to do that. So we word this a little bit differently. Does the current product already provide a solution? And we'll see these in practice. So this is understanding, is there a misunderstanding in how to use our product? Is there a lack of documentation? Maybe. And that's why this feature is being requested or this enhancement is being requested or a bug is being reported when it's not a bug. It's designed and working as expected. So that's where you identify that gap overall. You can identify a lack of education and maybe we need to update our knowledge base. Would this have a higher or lower priority than the current work? This is a question you not only ask yourself as the product manager defining the current work stream, but you ask the internal stakeholders. This wouldn't be something that you ask the customer because, as we all know, customers will always say, yes, this 100% has a higher priority than what you're working on because they can't see the bigger picture, right? You may be working on a whole bunch of internal process updates and that's the goal, but to your customer, that's not important, right? Internal process updates. So make sure you ask this question to yourself. And then once you have an idea of what the answer is to yourself, have a look at the different stakeholders involved in this decision, and identify availability of resources and the current roadmap and the business objectives and put that all in together when asking this one. Have you considered solution XYZ? Have you considered working it a different way? Sometimes this may even become a question where you're questioning your customer's process overall. Now, this is where you got to be careful because you can't just blatantly question how the customer uses a particular system or their internal process. That's why you got to step around it a little bit, tiptoe around it a little bit. But in some cases, you got to be looking at it as if, right, although we want to be eager to hear our feedback of our customers and adapt our product to that, sometimes you need to be willing to question the way your customers are following their business process. Because it can't all be changes on the product side of things. And again, it can't all be changes on their side. So you've got to find that equal balance. If we were to do this particular feature, Or if we were to approach it, and this is reaffirming with the original requester what they asked for, and if we were to approach it in this specific way, does that meet the business need? This is very important because you don't want to blindly implement things. We want to make sure that we always reaffirm. And this is a technique I learned very early on in my career, not just in product management, but in general, when I was consulting as well. I learned that you always digest things, reword it a little bit, and play it back and ask it as if it's a question back. Did you mean that you wanted to do X, Y, Z? Or if we were to do something similar to this, such as, would that be what you're after? And that provides you're an active listener to your stakeholders or whoever has submitted this, and it gives them the final say. You've got to make sure, and they might turn around and say, actually, no, we meant something completely different. And that confirms that, you misinterpreted it, or maybe they conveyed it wrong. And finally, who are the users affected by this? This question is specifically important for a user-based platform. For example, GridBuddy Connect is based on number of users, right? And we use users inside of it. So is it a specific group of users? Maybe your sales team, your finance team, because that will help determine what the driving force is behind it overall. When and where to ask the what. So it's important to know what they are and how to ask these types of questions. It's also important to know when and where to ask it overall. Upon receiving the initial requirements / request, this is definitely what you need to do. Every day when I receive escalations from our customer support team and their bugs coming in, first thing I do is ask those sorts of questions to myself, right? What is the impact? Who is impacted by this? Is there a workaround? And we've got it into a really good habit with our team where they provide a templated ticket that has the steps to reproduce, has the customer impact linked or multiple customers impacted linked, and we can understand that. With feature requests, sometimes it's not clear. On Productboard, our customers could submit and there's no set template, right? Our customers would submit a feature request and it might be a one-liner. That doesn't give you enough insight. So you need to reach out to them. Hey, Mr. Customer, we're starting to look into your feature request a little bit further. Could you be able to provide a little bit more information? What is an example of how you would handle this today? What is an example of which team is impacted by this overall? At any point in time during the life cycle of the task is when you should also ask this, right? You shouldn't just stick to asking this once and all these questions once at the beginning or in the middle or at the end. You should constantly reevaluate the task, right? Because these features, these enhancements, these bugs, the requests are constantly evolving as you get to dig into it deeper. Making sure that, sometimes we've gone through a process, we've refined a ticket, we've estimated it, the engineers have started working on it. It's gone into testing. What was delivered was based on the ticket and everything. But then I began to question it overall, right? We're looking at testing, or we're looking at the designs even before we even get to testing. And you start to question it again, not questioning what the engineers have done, but more so the requirements. We've done a POC, right? Do we really want to implement these as part of the product? And what do we achieve? So constantly keep asking these questions again. It is critical that, I would say not critical, crucial that if there is any requirement you later rethink that sounds ambiguous, then you reconfirm it by asking those what-based questions. At the first, it may be fine. You've taken that information in and you've put it straight forward. But when you've met with others and they've brought up, your engineers, that they're your backbone, right? And they're the ones that say to you, right, this actually impacts a lot more things if we were to deliver it. And then it causes a bit of ambiguity. There we go. We got that word overall. And that's when you should start to ask these questions again. And some requests may not involve development and therefore you should generalize this practice during all aspects of your work. So not just in a development cycle, but when you're working on, even a project plan or whatever it may be. I tend to always put this into practice, no matter what I'm doing, especially that part about reaffirming. If you're in a meeting, the most important skill to have is being able to digest something, play it back to someone the way you interpret it, and asking for affirmation to make sure that, confirmation, to make sure that you've understood exactly what the message is that's getting across. When and where to ask the why. So again, this is very similar. After fully understanding the requirements, business impact, users affected, and process affected. So this actually comes after the what. We want to ask the what first. We want to fully flush this out. Then we ask the whys, right? And they go hand in hand, but I tend to put a bit of an order around it overall. I'll be interested to know if you guys think the same, or maybe you even flip the script, right? Put the why first or the what. I'd love to hear that and what you guys are thinking of that overall and why you would do that. Then again, you want to ask it at any point in the lifetime of the request or the task, whatever you're working on. Always keep questioning, right? Always keep looking at it through a different lens and constantly understanding what is happening. And then, of course, like I said, when the what has been investigated. Now we're going to go on to some examples. So for the examples, we're going to use some real life examples I've gone through. One is going to be a bug and one is going to be a new feature request. To provide a bit of context, the product we're going to talk through is GridBuddy Connect that I manage. So quick overview of what GridBuddy Connect is. So essentially it is a simplistic view and combination of your data. This works for Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics 365 and Zendesk. It brings it all into one combination view, and it allows inline editing, mass updating, conditional formatting, record grouping, so that, you don't have to click through multiple records. So the main point, a main selling point, and the main benefit delivered by GridBuddy Connect is the fact that you have less clicks to achieve your data admin, right? You can get things done all in one place. You can spend more time on your jobs overall. So let's look at our first example as a result of this. The requirement is the customer is unable to mass update records. Now, again, this is a key competitive point we have overall. And so let's apply some of these what questions to it. First one is, what area of the product is affected? Now, the area of the product that is affected is what we call our grids, where our end users are using. Not the setup part, that's not really affected. And the back end part, that's not affected at all. It's the actual grids and usage of the grids when I'm looking at this. The next question is, what impact does this have on the product? Well, this is one of our key functionalities. And I know this is one of our most popular functionalities. I know this through our usage tracking data that we have overall. This is the most clicked feature that we have. So this overall impacts all of our customers, right? And that we prove that by reproducing the issue first, and we can see that we can do that. And usually with something as big as this, we have multiple customers reporting it within 5 minutes of each other, which is great because it tells us that our customers are using our products. The next point is, what are the steps to reproduce? I make it a habit with our support team, and we've worked together to build out a template of what is required to get it to an escalation to product. And the most important thing that is a requirement is the steps to reproduce. Steps to reproduce. As a grid user, very important because we have three different levels of users. Loaded a grid, doesn't matter what grid. I attempted to click the mass update button and nothing happened in this example. Then we go, what is the use case for the reporting customer? The use case is, and I know this, so I don't have to ask the customer. When you become fluent in your products, you understand this. Maybe you're just starting as a product manager and you're just learning your products and you're learning the impact it has and the wider systems that may connect to your product, which is fine. You can ask this to a customer. You can ask this internally. There is nothing wrong with admitting that you don't know the answer to something. There is a lot of things wrong with assuming and getting it wrong. And it gets, a lot more respect I found in the industry and with your customers if you straight up with them and you admit that I don't know this, but I'll get back to you. Now, in this case, I know the use case for the reporting customer is they want to be able to quickly update records in a mass way so that they don't have to add more time to their day-to-day admin. In particular, for a sales team, for example, you want to mass update the next step on your opportunity, right? Or you want to mass update all the close dates, or you want to mass update all the stages of your opportunity into the next stage. I could say, right, I know these 10 opportunities are now in the next stage and push them across. Or I want to close loss 3 of these opportunities, and you can, rather than individually clicking through them and having to do it. What resources available? This is when you look at, your team overall. You should always cater for every sprint to have that little bit of extra to work on customer support and production bugs. So that's where you look at overall in your sprint, right? Of my engineers, who is coming close to finishing a task? Or what task can be parked and we work on this, depending on the severity. Not always, but it depends on the severity. Now we go across to the why in this example. So again, customer is unable to, did I do an inconsistency here? Yes, I did. All right, so they're unable to mass update. Who are the users affected by this? Well, we said all our end users are affected by this. We can see that, customer X has reported this, and then customer Y has also reported this, and the customers reporting it vary in different sizes. So I wouldn't put a quantitative number against it, but in some cases you do. In this particular case, I wouldn't do that. Would this have a higher or lower priority than the current work? To answer that question, I tend to ask a couple more. Have you tried inline editing? Inline editing is another feature we have, which allows you to edit record by record rather than mass updating. You've got record by record. Now that establishes a workaround, but that is still impacting businesses overall from achieving our main benefit. So would this have a higher or lower priority than the current work? It would depend what the current work is. If the current work is fixing another bug that is more severe than this and doesn't have a workaround, then this would have a lower priority. If the current work is delivering a feature that, is, I would say, mildly reported and wanted, then you would definitely put a team on this to work on this overall. So that's our first example. Let's go across to our second example here. Our second example is a feature request. And this is actually a new feature we're working on, and it will be available in our next release. And I actually went through this all in practice. So I'm taking the lessons I've learned, I'm applying it here and sharing it with you guys today. So the feature request is the ability to push dates by a given number of days. We want to first ask, what date fields should this update apply to? Should it apply to all the date fields that are on a grid? Should it apply to a user-defined field? Maybe the user wants to select which fields they want to apply it to, not all, right? We don't want to assume something and say, right, you know what, we'll deliver this feature and we'll just assume that it applies to every single date field on the grid. What is the current process for updating dates? Now, we talked about before, we've got mass updating, we've got inline editing. That's the current process. Now, mass updating means that you have to actually set a physical date value from the calendar widget we have, the picker, rather than adding a number of days. So if, for example, I wanted to find, 2 weeks from now, that's easy, right? You look at the calendar where it is, and then you just go 2 forward. But if you wanted 30 days from now, you're gonna have to work it out, right, with the current functionality. Inline editing, same process. What is the expected outcome if the date is not populated? Now, this is actually a question that got brought up by one of my engineers because I personally oversighted this one. I didn't consider that a date field could be empty. To me, I considered everything else other than the scenario where a date field would be empty, which is a great point. Do we not update it? for that particular record? Or do we apply the number of days you want to add to the current date? We ended up going with the latter. So the number of days plus the current date. What benefit does this feature provide to the product and its goals? Now, the product is a user productivity tool. It is reducing the number of steps that you need for your data admin, and overall, this does reduce it because you don't have to do that calculation. You don't have to go through a widget and find, okay, 1, 2, 3, and count how many days it is to a certain point. You can just put in, right, the date it's on now, plus, and select the amount of days you want. Did I click it? There we go. What is the effort required to build this feature? And we talked about before, you've got to evaluate the effort, you've got to evaluate everything else that is going on. So you've got to make sure that you evaluate this as well. In this case, this was a fairly simple one. The effort required was about half a sprint, and our sprints are 2-week sprints. So it's about 5 days, right, when you look at business days. Now we ask the what, why. We've got the answer to what are we doing? How are we building it? Why? Does the product already provide a solution? Well, it does, but it's a bit more robust, right? It's not straightforward solution. And you sort of see that when we ask these questions, the what and the why, they're very similar, right? And you may be thinking, oh, you're just repeating yourself. They are sounding like they're repeating, but it's from a different perspective in each case. Would this have a higher or lower priority than the current work? Now, when this ticket first came in and this functionality first came in, it didn't have a higher priority than the current work. It went to the backlog, right? We had refined it because we have weekly refinements. We refined the ticket. We provided effort on it. I provided the user story acceptance criteria. We talked through it and we put it in for a later sprint because the current work and the next planned sprint and even the sprint after that were already based on our objectives. This would have been an added bonus where, you equate for a little bit extra every quarter of additional time that you can have as a little bit of a buffer in case things run over. And in this case, towards the end of the quarter, last quarter, we had some spare time, and this was the next best thing to work on. Have you considered using the mass update functionality? This is a question you would ask back to the customer, right? Or multiple customers. When you go, the easy way to do this is we got a bunch of insights on Productboard, and what we did was we composed an update, and that emailed all the people that submitted those insights. And what we did essentially is we asked the question, but obviously not in this shortened format, but a little bit more robust. We explained the situations that, you can apply mass update not just to the all records, you can apply it to selected records. And the feedback we got was mixed. Some customers says, yep, that's good enough for us for now. Others said, it doesn't quite meet our need. We don't want to train 200 users to apply that when you're potentially going to build something new. So we'll just wait for you to build the new one. Does the benefits delivered align to the product's vision? Now, the product's vision is to become a simple way to manage your data. And yes, these benefits do align to that overall. When you look at it, I've mentioned it's a productivity tool. This provides more productivity to the users, and it gives that alignment overall. So we've looked at 2 examples. We've looked at the what and why. We've looked at why prioritization is important. Let's look at the impacts of not asking. You start to delve into the area of want versus need. Early on in my career as a consultant, this is very popular, right? Delivering a want based on what the customer has asked for. They put some requirements forward to you and you take it as is. You don't question it. And this is where I started to learn these strategies and these little tips, right? Take a minute, think through it. And maybe there is an underlying need that you're going to miss. In turn, you deliver new problems and gaps in your solution, right? If you take the bear of, in most cases, some customers just solutionize. They say your product should do this, give you a solution rather than a problem you're trying to solve. And you want to get down to the original problem So you don't have that disconnect when you deliver the solution. You're wasting your resources when you're delivering that solution that then doesn't align to the business what they wanted. And you're going to have to then go and redo the work into the alignment overall. This has happened, there's nothing wrong with falling into this process, but as long as you take it as a learning curve. You need to learn from this. You need to say, right, how can we do this better again? And this is why retros are important, not just for features, but for your sprints. Retros are important even 2 months later from delivering a feature. What feedback do we have on that feature? You have disgruntled customers and stakeholders because they've waited all this time for a feature that doesn't meet the expectations they had in their mind rather than what they've given you. So it's always important to reaffirm with the customer, the stakeholders, right? This is how we're going to do it. Let's walk through a proof of concept first before we start building. Has a business impact, and these are monetary impact, process impact overall, and compliance. You can fall into a trap as well as with productivity. Right, we talked about a lot of these at the beginning and how this impacts your prioritization. If you're going to have to rework something because you made that mistake, you're going to have to push tasks out because you want to rework that as soon as possible to fix that disgruntled customers and stakeholders and fix the opinion they have on you. Benefits of asking. Various implementation options. As a result of asking all these questions and identifying things, you then discover that there's not just one approach for this. This new feature or enhancement, there's not just one approach. It seemed black and white when you first started out. And now you've got a couple of branches of where you can go. So it gives your product a lot more opportunity to grow. And if you say, for example, go down branch A, that then branches off into a lot more opportunity, right? That you may not have done if you didn't investigate this further and build it in a certain way. You have a long-term solution rather than a short-term solution. So it won't be something that is reevaluated constantly. It will be something that is built in place and used. And then the next iteration of it will be what that branch will be, right? Taking it to the next level, not fine-tuning. It's a connected solution as well, because you start to consider the bigger picture. You don't just consider it in silo as a feature and not how the entire process works or how the whole flow of a user works. You ask these questions, the what and why, you start to understand how the users use your system, because in some cases you understand the usage of your system, but then the users use it in a complete different way that you've never heard of. And that is very common, and that's happened quite a lot. Right? Each business uses a product differently, especially if you're in the SaaS world. Reduction in implementation costs. You do it once. You've got a thorough plan. You don't have to go to the drawing board mid-sprint. You've got clearly defined requirements, clearly defined testing scope. Everything is all there. You have expanded benefits because, this feature is built in a robust way. Our customers now can use it in multiple different use cases. It's not one set use case and one set flow. And the customer stakeholder satisfaction. So these are important to make sure that your customers are happy. They keep renewing if you're a subscription-based business. They keep coming back to you. Not only from a monetary perspective, but the way I look at it as well is your product doesn't advance without your customers and their feedback. And if the customers get disgruntled, they'll probably be reluctant to provide feedback, right? And we don't want that. We want customers to keep giving feedback. And that brings me to the end of it. So thank you all for listening to this. I think we have a couple questions, Scott, that we'll go through and we'll discuss.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys have more?
Yeah, we can jump over into Q&A. And we've got one there to start with, so we'll jump in with a question from Odessa. How do you handle disagreements, lack of alignment amongst the product team members on these factors? And do you vote or make the majority win, or do you rather aim at reaching consensus? Any tips you can share on that side?
Yeah, so that's a good point. It's the way I'm a very statistics-driven person, right? And factual person. I present the facts. But to handle this disagreements overall, you got to hear everyone's opinion. Not only just the face value opinion, you got to hear the question behind the question, right? And sometimes people have an idea of where they want to go, and this has happened quite a lot, right? And it may not necessarily be other product managers, it may be leadership that are questioning this and don't agree with the approach. And it's more taking a step back and being right, I want to hear you. I want to hear your voice. I want to hear why. We're not committed to this yet, so we want to understand more. And by doing that and leveling with those people, that's when you kind of get them on your side. So I think the best tip I can give you is be open to their opinions, be open to spending a little bit extra time to flush out why behind their opposition to it.
That's great. That's great. Some great advice. I'm curious, maybe just kind of piggybacking a little bit on that question is like, do you prefer to like prioritize kind of individually or more kind of collectively? Like, how do you approach it in your organization? Is it more of a collaborative activity or something, again, like you might do off the side of your desk over here?
So I tend to do it in both is the best part. I do my first iteration of prioritization. I like to sort of say I'm a bit OCD, right? I plan 3-4 sprints ahead, right, with tickets. I schedule them. And sometimes, I learned this a little bit the hard way at the beginning. You got to be open to change, right? And then the iteration is always having that discussion with your engineers, the engineer director. I have the discussion with, where are you going to move resources this sprint or this quarter? This is where we're going. I have discussions with my boss, who is the head of our organization for the products. And, does this align with the roadmaps? This is my justification and why the order of things. And he'll give his input of what the latest update is from, management. So it's a collective, but I would say it's good to have the first iteration by yourself, have a plan that you can come to the table with and justify it, and then be willing to throw that whole plan out the window at the same point.
Oh, that's great. Great. Another question here from Katie. What if you can't reproduce an issue to evaluate it? What if people take the steps to reproduce and have different results?
Yeah, this is a classic one, and it is literally the most painful situation you can be in. The approach I take really is, if you let's break it down into the two, right? Where you can't reproduce it at all. You got to look at what could affect it on their end, especially if we're talking in software. Like in our world, GridBuddy Connect, we kind of look at things like, do you have an ad blocker on, or have you disabled third-party cookies, just depending on how things work. Then we usually tend to get to a point where we're like, okay, let's get an expert on the call and debug this together. And we have logs in the back end, we can see when they're doing certain actions. So that's the way you do it if you can't reproduce it. It gets to a point where you're going to have to pretty much agree with the customer, right? If you want us to fix this, we need access to your environment. And that is, a joint effort with the customer, making sure it's isolated, making sure they're comfortable with that as well. And even if you have to be on screen and sharing with them while you have that access and they revoke it once you get off the call, that's something you have to get used to. The other bit about, you get different outcomes, well, it depends what the different outcomes are. If the different outcomes are also other bugs, then you definitely need to log those and look at them. But I think it's making sure the environment and the setup you're in exactly matches the customers. And this is where our support team really come in hand. And I love our support team for what they do here, right? They are that channel in between product and customers, right? And we pass back the feedback, go, right, we've got a bit of a different outcome. Can we get them to describe what browser are they using? What computer are they using? If they're using a Mac, are they using a Windows? What type of user are they logged in as? What kind of grid is it? What's it built off? Is it built off Salesforce? Is it built off Dynamics? And you got to work with those teams to make sure you get as much information as possible. So I think to stop the back and forth, and you heard me going with the support team, the first thing is having that relationship so that they come to the table with as much information as possible from the customer.
Yeah, that's good.
That's how I would handle it.
I'm going to throw in a question at you, maybe on the side is Rich Mirnoff recently wrote a little bit about the topic of prioritization being a political issue within an organization and team. I'm curious maybe how you've dealt with the politics part of this. I know every company, it isn't smooth and always highly cooperative. Maybe it isn't validity, but I don't know. But how have you navigated the political landscape of making a prioritization decision?
Yeah, I think on that point, the best thing about validity is everyone's willing to hear each other, right? It's not straight, this is what we're doing, I don't care what you have to say. Everyone in the organization is willing to listen to each other. And that's where, there will be politics no matter where you go, right? I'm not saying there isn't. The way to handle it is sometimes you got to give a little to get a bit, right? And like I said, it took me a while to understand throwing out the plan, even though I thought it was really great plan. I was energized, I was enthusiastic for it, but you got to have faith in the others, right? And at the time I was like, no, this is complete wrong direction. Why are we doing this? Right? And then it ended up becoming the best thing we've ever done, right, for the product. So you got to have faith behind it. You got to be willing to have that conversation, sometimes removed from the bigger audience and with having an individual like your manager or someone, and just discuss, what is the motive behind this and what's the end goal we want to achieve. Yeah. And that will help you understand a little bit better and navigate those politics a bit. Yeah. So it's a bit more about, sorry.
I see someone's got a little bit more of an addition to that question here of like, how do you deal with that hippo or the suggestions from leadership, what move the needle from business perspective, but they're really pushing you to do it.
So I guess, if you always have people from other parts of the business, whether it's leadership, sales, service, whatever, trying to influence your product. And that's fine, right? And everyone's entitled to the say, and everyone's entitled to determine priority. But if you could determine, a counter, I wouldn't even call a counter argument, a counter prioritization, and justify it and say, right, we want to work on this first because this delivers more benefit. And this is where Productboard comes in really handy with us, right? We seek our Salesforce account across the Productboard, and we could see actually 10 people have voted for this. I get that the idea you want to work on is a great idea and it's good for the product, but we don't have the research. We will have to go and do the research. But right now we have the research for this, right? And this is something we can deliver now. And this is the benefit we'll get. These are the customers that will be satisfied. This is the revenue they contribute. And you have that justification. And that actually becomes a greater conversation where, the person you're talking to, whether it's a leadership, a C-level executive or whatever, actually turns around and says to you, right, that's actually great. And they just actually want, at the end of the day, their item to be looked at. Yeah. And that's what I've found. Yeah. To be heard, to be looked at and say, right, you're going to investigate this. That's the main point.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's excellent to hear. We're going to wrap things up. Again, thank you, Andrew, for today's session and time. It was great to have you here. And it's always great to have somebody from our community contributing to the content and conversations too that we're doing here in our events and stuff like that. So I put in the chat there just a link to the post-event survey. We'd love to hear your feedback on the event. I know Andrew would as well. So feel free to share the survey out and contribute to that. We do give away a prize as well as part of this. So always a chance to win something nice as well on that side. We've also invited you to continue the conversation. If you've got questions that maybe you didn't get a chance to ask today, some things that you want to ask later on, Andrew is part of our community. You can easily start a new conversation or topic on that side, flag him in part of it, and see if we can get some discussion and conversation going on that end. We've also got some great events coming up next week. We've got Ian Ames talking about product prioritization as a triage. Ian's a UK-based product person, and really excited to have him and his talk coming up. We've got Matt Atkins, who's also one of our customers in our community as well, talking about building hardware in a software world on April 28th. Then we have Laura and Dina joining us on May 5th. Laura is one of our product managers here at Productboard, and she'll be talking about some great research that she's done recently with various product leaders globally around dealing with prioritization and getting to really what customers need on that side. And then on May 12th, we're also have Michelle Hansen, who's helping us with troubleshooting user interviews. Michelle wrote a really fantastic book called Deploy Empathy, you haven't had a chance to read it, encourage you to do so. But it'll be a really great interactive session, lots of good conversation on how to tackle those classic user interview problems and really understanding the why as much as the what that Andrew talked about today. Lots of other ways as well to get involved in the community, whether it be our round tables, which happen once a month on the second Wednesday, our Meet a Maker program, which gives you an opportunity to connect one-on-one with other people in the community, and also these kinds of speaking opportunities. If you want to get up, share some of your knowledge, help us understand things, how you approach product and the practice that you have, we'd love to hear from you and get you involved on that side. So with that in mind, we'll give you a few minutes to get back, I guess, maybe to your next meetings and the rest of your day. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, Andrew, again for the great session and conversation.
Thanks for having me, Scott, and see you guys.
All right, take care.